Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of my weekly legal presentation entitled Legalese, where I try to explain things that have to do with the law in a way that makes them easy to understand, as well as easy to apply to your life, particularly if you find yourself as someone who's been involved in an accident, or if someone you care about or you love has been involved in an accident. This is some helpful information that can assist in helping you through the process. And it's an unfortunate process, but it does happen, and it happens to a lot of people. So it's good to be armed with a arsenal of information. In particular, nobody wants these things to happen. Nobody wants to be involved in an accident. Certainly don't want our loved ones to be involved either. But there are certain things that you can do before something like this happens that can actually help in the event it does. And once again, information is key. And I received a question from one of my listeners that was a very, very good question. They found that years ago they've been involved in a car accident. They didn't have an attorney. The hospital that they went to ended up billing their auto insurance, however, did not bill their health insurance. And the client insisted that they provided the health insurance to the medical providers or the medical business office at the hospital. Trouble is, when it came time to resolve the bills at the end of the case, this was some 7, 8 months later, the bills were never submitted to the health insurance carrier. And those were the bills that were left over once no fault benefits had paid under their auto policy. So the client's health insurance policy was never billed, and that was due to an error by the hospital people. They ended up not accepting the bills later because the health insurance carrier had rules that only 180 days would they allow the submission of bills. After that period of time, they would not anymore, and the client's time had run out. So this question really deals with that issue in particular. What are the kinds of insurance coverages that are going to come into play and what they mean and why they're necessary? So let's get started. Now, when you've first been involved in a motor vehicle accident in Florida, and I've talked about this before, Florida law requires that the first $10,000 of your medical bills is going to be covered by your no-fault benefits or your PIP benefits. Now, PIP benefits are provided under your policy of automobile insurance. I've talked about this before, but we'll talk about it again because it's very, very important. Oh, I got Joe Salcero is visiting us today. Hey, Joe, how are you doing? Thank you for stopping in. Just talking a little bit of PIP business here, but thank you. So PIP are your no-fault benefits. Now you pay premium in order to have this benefit. You pay for it under your own policy because Florida law requires that you cover your first $10,000 of bills out of your auto policy. So that's why this is done. Now, no-fault benefits or PIP benefits are paid at a rate of 80% for your medical bills and 60% of your lost wages up to the $10,000 limit minus any deductible that you may have under your policy. Some people incur a deductible under their PIP so that they can lessen their premiums. So some people carry 500, some people carry 1,000. But either way, once they deduct that amount from your PIP benefits, the remaining amount will be the amount that'll be available toward your medical bills. So PIP being the most important, or the no-fault benefit, it's the same thing. And they're the primary source of payment. So when you're involved in an accident, if you go to the emergency room, and this particular scenario involves that happening, if the incident is such that you go to the emergency room and get checked out, they're going to check you in before checking you out. They're going to check you in at the hospital front desk, and it is their responsibility to ask you for your insurance information. Now, you're going to give them your no-fault benefits. You're going to give them your auto insurance policy, or whoever's auto insurance policy may be responsible for covering you. Sometimes you may not know this later on, in which case you just simply supplement the information to the hospital. But very importantly, under the secondary insurance, make sure that you provide and make sure that the hospital records your health insurance. Because once your no-fault benefits pay, and they become exhausted after the $10,000 is spent, then you have to fall back on your health insurance in order to cover your balances. And that's really what it's for. However, health insurance will often not consider bills related to an accident until PIP benefits have been exhausted and until the health insurance carrier has notice of exhaustion. Now, this is something that really should be provided to them by the emergency rooms once they receive notice, or the medical providers once they receive notice of exhaustion. But really, this is something the attorney can do as well. If we receive notice of exhaustion, we can forward it to the ER, and they can then take it from there. But before they're going to bill, your health insurance is not going to accept your bills until they have proof of exhaustion of your no-fault benefits. Some people have heard it said that a health insurance carrier will not cover your auto bills. Now, that's not true. They simply have no duty to cover for your automobile accident-related bills until that duty becomes what we call executory, meaning owing, and that doesn't happen until they have proof of exhaustion of the benefits. So those are two very important coverages that are going to come into play. There's going to be your no-fault benefits of your PIP, and you don't have to pay PIP back. PIP does not get paid back. So if you get into an accident, even if you're at fault, you're entitled to treat. In fact, the law sort of requires it of you to mitigate your damage. So use those no-fault benefits to treat, but also provide the hospital with that proof and the information about your health insurance carrier. Make sure that they have that, and and double check with them too. Make sure it's in their computer. I have had some very, very good clients that are very methodical and very sharp, claim they provided this information to the hospital only to find out later that they hadn't, in which case we had to go back and we had to fix some things. But in any event, those are two very important coverages. And additional coverages that are going to come into play in this case, I may as well talk about them, are going to be bodily injury liability. Now, this is something that if you get into a motor vehicle accident, you are hoping and expecting, although in Florida, with the amount of drivers that don't carry enough insurance, it may not be worth expecting. But normally you can expect that people would be carrying bodily injury liability, because for any event that you are not insured, you are self-insured. So if you're carrying an auto policy, you need to make sure you have bodily injury liability so that in case you hurt somebody, then there is money to pay their bills, their medical bills. Now, some people don't carry it because it isn't mandatory. And despite initiatives to make bodily injury liability mandatory at a certain increment, they're talking about maybe doing 25,000, 50,000 bodily injury, and then maybe graduating it, stepping it up over a course of years, but making it mandatory. It is, though, it is a contractual coverage and it is optional still, but do opt to take it, and don't opt for 10,000, 20,000, or 2550 if you can do better than that, because honestly, 1020 is not going to go very far. And if you injure somebody, like I said, if you're not completely insured for the event, you're self-insured for those parts insurance doesn't carry. So essentially, you want to make sure that you've got enough coverage, and carrying bodily injury liability insurance is going to be key. If you find yourself in a situation where you're in an accident and your no-fault benefits have been paid mostly to the hospital and to the hospital radiology and the ER physicians, which happens a good deal of the time when people have gotten hit pretty severely and they've gone to the hospital. I'm not talking about being evac'd out by a helicopter. That's a whole different story. That's a fortune. But I'm just talking about your average motor vehicle accident where somebody goes to the ER. They're going to go through $10,000 of your PIP, pretty close, because the hospitals get paid about 75% of their bills by the no-fault carriers. And so what's left over, hopefully the clinics that treat you for follow-up treatment and provide your imaging will have some money to bill as well. But you want the other driver to be carrying bodily injury liability, and you want to carry it yourself on your own policy, and there's a reason for that. The best way to ensure that you have enough medical benefits under your auto policy, and this is after your PIP is exhausted, whether you carry health insurance or not, you really, really need to make sure you're carrying adequate amounts of uninsured motorist benefits, or or UIM in the case of underinsured motorist benefits. But this is one of the most important coverages you can possibly have for your auto insurance. And it's something that the insurance company has to actually get you to waive on a whole separate document if you don't want to have it. But I would advise you to always take it out. It's never going to be a reputable insurance agent that's going to try to talk you out of it. Don't let them talk you out of uninsured motorist coverage, because if you're injured by somebody and they're not carrying bodily injury liability or enough bodily injury liability, and your PIP benefits exhaust and say you don't have health insurance, or even if you do have health insurance, you want to make sure that there's going to be a source of reimbursement for you for your residual medicals, your loss of enjoyment of life, your economic and your non-economic damages. And unless you take out a good policy of uninsured motorist, that money may not be there. So that's the best way to protect yourself, and that's something that you should do now. Go over your health, your auto insurance policy. I deal with a representative by the name of Craig Most with Most Insurance, and he writes my policies, and Craig is very good. And I would give Craig a call at Most Insurance to go over your auto policy with you. But what he's going to tell you is that there are certain coverages that you need. You need to carry the bodily injury liability in case you injure somebody else. So suppose you're in that scenario where you're driving and you cause an accident. Somebody goes to the hospital or is injured and requires treatment. If you don't carry bodily injury liability or don't carry it in adequate amounts, whatever amount you are short, you are self-insured for that amount. So if they incur medical bills and say $100,000 worth of medical bills, and you've only got a 1020 liability policy, then you're going to be in the hole for $90,000 worth of their bills. And if that gets reported to Tallahassee that you weren't carrying sufficient amounts of bodily injury liability, that you caused an accident, that you caused injury, then they are going to suspend your driver's license. They're going to require that you carry FR44 and SR22 insurance. And that is something that's going to require you to carry $100,000, $300,000 bodily injury. You're going to pay through the nose for it, and you're going to have to carry that insurance for 4 years. Now, if you're carrying bodily injury liability, suppose you have a 25/50 policy and you hurt somebody, and for some reason your policy limit is adequate, or you can settle within the policy limit, then there's never going to be the danger of your license being suspended. But you can see the importance of carrying bodily injury liability, which is the first step. And the second step, and you can't do this unless you have bodily injury liability, is to carry your benefits. That way, if you're involved in an accident and you're injured and there's no or minimal bodily injury liability, you have your PIP and you have your coverage on your policy, which are a 1-2 punch and are going to make sure that you're compensated. But you want to carry them in decent enough amounts. I recommend people carry bodily injury liability of at least 100,000, 300,000, and benefits in at least 100, 300,000 increments as well, or more. Now, the good thing about benefits is you can stack benefits times the number of vehicles that you insure under a certain policy. So if you own multiple vehicles, then you can choose a lesser increment, however, stack it times the number of vehicles, which will help the members of your family in case they're involved in an accident, because then they are not only going to have to rely upon their own if they need to, but they'll also have the benefit of the that are under the other under the other vehicles on the policy. So those are 3 very important coverages to talk about, and I'm just answering the question that was asked of me. What types of insurance are implicated when you go to the ER, when you go to the hospital? So back to the beginning, PIP is going to cover the first $10,000 of bills. But second, you want to make sure that the hospital's got your health insurance information. It is so important. And you don't, oftentimes, the hospital doesn't bill like they're supposed to. And, then you wind up having to negotiate with the client with the ER, and hopefully at their mercy as far as negotiating their bill is concerned. And sometimes they're accommodating and sometimes they're not so accommodating. But if you provide the health insurance and it's billed the way it should be billed, then that should not be a problem. But folks, that's it for this evening, and really just answering a single question. But thank you very much for tuning in. And please remember, if you liked what you heard, please smash the like button, share or comment below. And remember, if you've been involved in a motor vehicle accident or somebody that you know has been involved in a motor vehicle accident, call me. Call me first, in fact, before calling the insurance companies. I can be reached at 727-656-7852. And remember, I'm attorney Chris DeBarry. And thank you for watching my weekly show, Legal Ease. And remember my motto, when it comes to your injury, it's personal to me because it's personal to you. Thank you, and have a good and safe evening.